Ruth's hands shook as she tore down the notice from the frozen post. Wanted a cook for winter, room board, and honest wages. Behind her, 3 children huddled in a broken wagon, their breath rising like prayers into the bitter cold. Her youngest still bore the bruise on his temple, the one her husband had given him 3 nights ago. The night she finally ran. She didn't know if the rancher would take them. She only knew one truth: if her husband found them first, none of them would survive the winter. Before we continue this incredible journey, subscribe to our channel and follow Ruth's story to the very end. Comment your city below. I want to see how far this story travels. The notice had been tacked crooked on the post outside Miller's Creek Trading Hall. Its corners stiff with ice. Its ink bled from last night's snow. Ruth read it 3 times before she believed it was real. Wanted a cook for winter. Room board and honest wages. Caleb Thornton Ridgeback Ranch. Mama. She turned. Sammy stood behind her, 10 years old, but carrying the weight of a man twice his age. His eyes darted to the street, to the shadows, to every doorway where danger might hide. "Is someone coming?" he asked. "No, baby. Not yet." But she didn't know that. Couldn't know. Ezra had connections everywhere. Men who owed him favors. Men who feared him. Men who would drag a runaway wife back to her husband without asking questions. She'd been running for 6 days. "Get your sister and brother," Ruth said. "We're going to find this ranch." The road to Ridgeback took 4 hours in the snow. The mule struggled. The wagon creaked. Grace sat silent in the back, her 7-year-old eyes fixed on nothing the way they'd been since the night Ezra threw Benny against the wall. Benny himself slept fitfully, his small body curled against his sister. The bruise on his temple had faded from purple to yellow-green. It would heal. The memories wouldn't. Ruth held the reins and didn't let herself think about anything except the next mile. The next hour. The next breath. Survival first. Everything else later. The ranch appeared as the sun began to set. A sturdy house, a barn, smoke rising from a chimney, signs of life, signs of warmth. Ruth stopped the wagon at the gate and waited. A man emerged from the barn, tall, broad-shouldered, his face weathered by years of work, and something else, something that looked like grief worn so long it had become part of his bones. He walked toward them slowly, eyes taking in the broken wagon, the exhausted mule, the 3 small faces peering from under threadbare quilts. "Ma'am." He stopped a respectful distance away. "You lost?" "No, sir." Ruth's voice came out steadier than she felt. "I saw your notice. In town. You're looking for a cook." His eyes flickered to the children. Back to her. "I am. I can cook." Ruth lifted her chin. "I can clean, mend, wash. I work from dawn to dark, and I don't complain." "That notice was for one person." "I know." Ruth swallowed hard. "But my children, they're quiet. They won't be trouble. They can help with chores. Sammy's strong for his age. Grace knows how to—" "Ma'am." The man held up a hand. "Where's your husband?" The question hit like a fist. Ruth had practiced this lie for 6 days, had whispered it to herself in the dark over and over until it felt almost true. Dead. The word tasted like ash. 6 months ago. Fever took him. The man studied her face. Ruth forced herself not to look away. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said finally. "Thank you." Silence stretched between them. The wind picked up, biting through Ruth's thin shawl. "Please." The word escaped before she could stop it. "We've been traveling for days. The children need warmth. I'll work twice as hard as any man you could hire. I'll sleep in the barn if you want, just please. Give us a chance." The man looked at her for a long moment. Then his gaze moved to the wagon, to Benny's small form, barely visible under the quilts, to Sammy standing guard like a soldier. Something shifted in his face. "You'll stay in the house," he said quietly. "All of you. Barn's no place for children." Ruth's breath caught. "Sir." Name's Caleb. He was already moving toward the wagon. Let's get them inside before they freeze. The house was small but warm. A fire crackled in the hearth. A table sat near the kitchen, 2 chairs pushed against it. A cot rested against the far wall. Ruth stood in the doorway, taking it all in. This place that smelled like wood smoke and coffee, and something she'd almost forgotten. Safety. It ain't much, Caleb said behind her. But the roof don't leak and the walls keep out the cold. It's perfect. Ruth's voice cracked. It's absolutely perfect. Caleb moved past her to stoke the fire. There's a room in the back. It was... He stopped. Started again. It's empty. Your children can sleep there. You can take the cot. Where will you sleep? I'll manage. Ruth wanted to argue. Wanted to insist she'd take the floor of the barn anywhere but a bed that belonged to him. But Benny was shivering in her arms, and Grace hadn't spoken in 3 days, and Sammy was watching Caleb with suspicious eyes that broke her heart. Thank you, she said. I don't know how to... You can thank me by making breakfast tomorrow. Caleb's voice was gruff, but not unkind. I've been eating my own cooking for 10 years. It'll be nice to have something that doesn't taste like burnt leather. A ghost of a smile touched Ruth's lips. I can manage that. Good. He grabbed his coat from a hook by the door. I'll be in the barn. Holler if you need anything. Then he was gone, leaving Ruth alone with her children in a stranger's house, wondering if she'd finally found salvation or just another trap waiting to spring. The first night passed in fits and starts. Ruth couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboards made her bolt upright. Every gust of wind sounded like hoofbeats. Every shadow looked like Ezra's silhouette come to drag her back. She checked on the children a dozen times. Benny slept soundly, thumb in his mouth. Grace lay rigid, eyes closed, but not sleeping. Sammy sat with his back against the wall, a broken piece of wood clutched in his hand like a weapon. You should rest, Ruth whispered. Someone needs to keep watch. Sammy? He's gonna come, Mama. Her son's voice was flat. Old. You know he is. He always finds us. Ruth knelt beside him, took his cold hands in hers. Not this time. How do you know? She didn't. She couldn't. But she would die before she let Ezra touch her children again. Because I won't let him. Ruth squeezed his hands. I promise you, Sammy, whatever it takes, I will keep you safe. Sammy stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly the tension in his shoulders eased. Okay, Mama. He didn't believe her. She could see it in his eyes, but he was too tired to argue, and eventually his head drooped against the wall, and he slept. Ruth sat beside him until dawn, watching the door, waiting for a monster that didn't come. Morning brought a different kind of challenge. Ruth woke to find Caleb already gone, his boots leaving wet tracks across the floor. She dressed quickly, splashed water on her face, and got to work. The kitchen was sparse but serviceable. Flour in a tin, eggs in a basket, a side of bacon hanging in the cold room. Ruth made biscuits, fried eggs, brewed coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in. When Caleb came in from the barn stamping snow from his boots, the smell stopped him in his tracks. Well, he stood in the doorway, something like wonder on his weathered face. That ain't burnt leather. Sit down, Ruth said, before it gets cold. He sat. He ate. He didn't speak for 10 minutes, just worked through 3 biscuits and a pile of eggs, like a man who'd forgotten what real food tasted like. When he finally looked up, his eyes were different. Softer. You weren't lying about being able to cook. I don't lie. The words came out before Ruth could stop them, and the irony hit her like a slap. She was lying. Every moment. Every breath. The biggest lie of her life was sitting between them like an invisible wall. Her husband wasn't dead. Her husband was hunting her. Ma'am? Caleb's voice cut through her spiral. You all right? Ruth blinked. Forced a smile. Fine. Just tired from the journey. He studied her for a moment, then nodded and went back to eating. The children emerged slowly, Benny first drawn by the smell of bacon. Grace crept behind him, silent as a ghost. Sammy came last, positioning himself between his siblings and Caleb. "Morning," Caleb said to them. "You hungry?" Benny nodded eagerly. Grace said nothing. Sammy's eyes narrowed. "It's all right," Ruth said quickly. "Mr. Thornton he's letting us stay. He's a good man." "That remains to be seen," Sammy muttered. "Samuel." "It's fine." Caleb's voice was calm. "Boys got every right to be cautious. Don't know me from Adam." He stood cross to the stove and filled 3 plates with food. He set them on the table and stepped back, giving the children space. "Eat up," he said. "You're gonna need your strength. Winter out here don't play nice." Benny attacked his plate immediately. Grace picked at hers, taking tiny bites. Sammy stared at his food like it might be poisoned. "It's safe," Caleb said quietly. "I promise." Sammy's jaw tightened. "My father made promises too." The words hung in the air like ice. Ruth's heart stopped. She waited for Caleb to ask questions, to dig deeper, to unravel the careful lie she'd built. But he just nodded slowly. "Then I reckon you learned not to trust easy." He grabbed his hat from the hook. "That's smart. Keep that. But I ain't your father, and I don't break my word." He walked out without another glance. Sammy watched him go, something complicated moving behind his eyes. "Mama," he said softly. "What if he finds out?" Ruth didn't answer. She couldn't. Because if Caleb found out the truth, that her husband was alive, that she'd lied, that she was a fugitive from her own marriage, he'd throw them out into the cold. And the cold wasn't the worst thing waiting for them. Ezra was. The days fell into a rhythm faster than Ruth expected. She woke before dawn, made breakfast, cleaned the house, prepared dinner, mended clothes that hadn't been touched in years, swept floors, washed dishes, worked until her hands ached and her back screamed. She welcomed the pain. It meant she was useful. It meant she was earning her keep. It meant Caleb had less reason to send them away. The children adapted in their own ways. Benny followed Caleb around like a shadow, fascinated by the horses and the cattle and everything else the ranch had to offer. He chattered constantly about animals, about the snow, about nothing at all, and Caleb listened with patience that surprised Ruth. Grace remained silent. She helped Ruth in the kitchen, her small hands surprisingly capable, but she never spoke. Not a word. Not since the night Ezra nearly killed her brother. Ruth had taken her to a doctor in the last town. The man had shrugged and said some children just needed time. She wanted to believe him. Sammy was the hardest. He worked beside Caleb during the day, chopping wood, feeding animals, hauling water. But he never let down his guard, never smiled, never relaxed. He was waiting, Ruth knew. Waiting for the other shoe to drop. Waiting for Caleb to become Ezra. One evening, Ruth found Caleb sitting on the porch staring at the darkening sky. She brought him coffee without being asked. "Thank you." He wrapped his hands around the cup. "You don't have to keep doing this, you know, waiting on me. It's my job. It's more than that." He glanced at her. "You work like you're scared of stopping." Ruth didn't answer. Couldn't. "You're safe here," Caleb said quietly. "Whatever you're running from, and don't tell me you ain't running. I can see it in your eyes. It can't get you here." "You don't know that." "I know I got a rifle, a locked door, and 10 years of not caring if I lived or died." His voice was flat. "Now I got 3 kids eating at my table and a woman who makes biscuits worth fighting for. Anything wants to take that away, it's gonna have to go through me." Ruth's throat tightened. "Why?" "Why what?" "Why do you care? You don't know us. Don't know anything about us." Caleb was quiet for a long moment. The wind picked up, carrying ice crystals that stung exposed skin. "I had a family once," he said finally. "Wife, daughter. They died 10 years ago. Fever. I was away selling cattle when it happened. Ruth's heart clenched. I'm sorry. I ain't telling you for pity. Caleb's voice was steady. I'm telling you because I know what it's like to lose everything. And I know what it's like to wonder if there's any point in going on. He looked at her, then really looked, and Ruth saw something in his eyes she recognized. Survivor. Your boy watches me like I'm a snake about to strike, Caleb continued. Your girl won't speak. Your littlest has bruises that don't come from falling. His jaw tightened. I don't know what happened to you. I don't need to know. But I know this: you're scared of someone. And whoever it is, they ain't getting through that door. Ruth couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but stand there as tears she'd been holding back for weeks finally broke free. Caleb didn't try to touch her, didn't offer comfort, just sat there solid and steady while she cried. When she finally stopped, he handed her a handkerchief. Get some sleep, he said gruffly. Tomorrow's gonna be cold. We'll need to bring the cattle closer. He stood and walked into the house, leaving Ruth alone on the porch with her tears and her secrets and the terrifying, dangerous feeling of hope. A week passed. Then two. Ruth began to relax. Not completely, never completely, but enough that she stopped checking the windows every 5 minutes. Enough that she slept more than an hour at a time. Enough that she caught herself humming while she cooked. The children changed too. Benny laughed again. Actually laughed, chasing chickens through the yard, while Caleb pretended to be scandalized by the chaos. Grace still didn't speak, but she smiled sometimes. Small, tentative smiles that made Ruth's heart ache with hope. Even Sammy softened. He still watched Caleb carefully, but the hostility had faded. Now he watched with something more like curiosity, like he was trying to figure out if this man could actually be trusted. Ruth found herself watching Caleb too. She noticed how he never raised his voice, even when things went wrong. How he asked instead of ordered. How he thanked her for every meal, every mended shirt, every small thing she did. She noticed how he kept his distance. Never touched her unless absolutely necessary. Never assumed. Never demanded. So different from Ezra. So terrifyingly, wonderfully different. One evening, after the children were asleep, Ruth found Caleb in the kitchen, struggling to patch a hole in his coat. Let me. She took the needle from his clumsy fingers. You'll just make it worse. He surrendered the fabric without argument. Never was any good at sewing. My mother taught me. Ruth's hands moved automatically. Said a woman who couldn't mend would never keep a household together. She sounds practical. She was. Ruth's voice softened. She died when I was 16, before I married. She stopped. The word husband stuck in her throat. Before you married him, Caleb finished quietly. Ruth's hands stilled on the needle. Yes. He wasn't kind to you. It wasn't a question. Ruth didn't answer. Couldn't. The bruise on your boy's face, Caleb continued. It wasn't from falling, was it? Silence. You don't have to tell me. Caleb's voice was gentle. But Ruth, if someone's looking for you, I need to know. Not to send you away. To be ready. Ruth looked up, met his eyes. She should tell him the truth. Should confess everything, that Ezra was alive, that she'd lied, that any day now a monster might appear on his doorstep demanding his property back. But the words wouldn't come. He can't hurt us anymore, she said instead. He's gone. It was almost true. Almost. Caleb studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. All right. He stood, taking his mended coat. But if that ever changes, you tell me. Understand? I understand. He walked to the door, then paused. Ruth. Yes. You're safe here. His voice was rough but certain. Whatever else happens, I want you to know that. Then he was gone, and Ruth sat alone with her needle and her lies, and the terrible knowledge that safety was an illusion. Because somewhere out there, Ezra was looking. and he would never stop until he found her. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Ruth was in the kitchen when Caleb came in from town, his face troubled. He held an envelope in his hand. "This was posted at the trading hall," he said, "addressed to the ranch." Ruth's blood went cold. "Who's it from?" "No name." Caleb turned it over. "No return address." He opened it, read it. His face went still. "What does it say?" Ruth's voice was barely a whisper. Caleb looked at her for a long moment. Then he handed her the letter. One line. Neat handwriting. Words that stopped her heart. "I know where you are." The paper fell from Ruth's numb fingers. "Ruth." Caleb's voice was steady. "Who's looking for you?" She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The room spun around her. "Ruth." Hands on her shoulders. Firm, grounding. "Look at me." She looked up into gray-blue eyes that held no judgment, no anger, just concern. "Tell me," he said. "Whatever it is, tell me." And Ruth, who had held her secret so tight it had become part of her bones, finally broke. "My husband," she whispered. "He's alive." Caleb didn't move, didn't speak. "I lied." The words tumbled out unstoppable now. "I said he was dead, but he's not. He's Ezra. He beat me. For 3 years. I stayed because I didn't know where to go, and then he hurt Benny. He threw my baby against a wall, and I—" Her voice broke. "I ran. I took the children, and I ran, and I've been hiding ever since. And now he's found me, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have told you." "Ruth." Caleb's voice cut through her spiral. "Stop." She stopped. Waited for the anger, the disgust, the order to get out. Instead, Caleb did something she didn't expect. He pulled her into his arms. It wasn't romantic, wasn't inappropriate, just warm, steady, safe. "You did what you had to do," he said quietly. "To protect your children. That ain't something to apologize for." Ruth sobbed against his chest. "You should send us away." "I ain't sending you nowhere." "He'll come. Let him come." Caleb's arms tightened around her. "I've been waiting 10 years for something worth fighting for. Reckon I finally found it." Ruth pulled back, staring at him through tear-blurred eyes. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you risk yourself for us?" Caleb reached up, wiped a tear from her cheek with his rough thumb. "Because some things are worth the risk." Outside, the wind howled. Snow began to fall thick and fast. And somewhere in the darkness, a man was coming. A man with violence in his heart and possession in his eyes. The storm was just beginning. Ruth couldn't stop shaking. She sat at the kitchen table, the letter crumpled in her fist, while Caleb paced the floor. His boots struck the boards with a rhythm that matched her racing heart. "How long?" he asked. "Since you ran?" 3 weeks. "And he's been tracking you the whole time?" Ruth nodded. Her throat was too tight for words. Caleb stopped pacing. He grabbed his rifle from above the door and checked the chamber. "What are you doing?" Ruth's voice cracked. "Getting ready." "Caleb, you don't understand. Ezra, he's not just violent. He's connected. He knows people, lawmen, bounty hunters, men who owe him favors." "So do I." "He'll kill you." Caleb looked at her then, really looked. His eyes held something fierce and steady that made her breath catch. "He can try." Before Ruth could respond, footsteps pounded from the back room. Sammy burst through the door, his face pale. "Mama, there's someone outside." Ruth's blood froze. Caleb moved to the window, pressing himself against the wall. He peered through the frost-covered glass. "One rider," he said quietly. "Coming slow." "Is it him?" Ruth grabbed Sammy, pulling him behind her. "Is it Ezra?" "Can't tell. Too dark." Ruth's mind raced. Grace and Benny were still in the back room. If she could get them, if she could find another way out. Stay here. Caleb's voice was iron. Don't open that door for anyone but me. Caleb! But he was already gone, slipping out the back way, rifle in hand. Ruth pulled Sammy to the floor, pressing them both against the wall beneath the window. Her heart pounded so loud, she was sure the rider could hear it. Minutes passed, each one an eternity. Then a knock at the door. Ruth's hand flew to her mouth. Mrs. McAllister. A man's voice, unfamiliar. I know you're in there. I can see the light. Sammy's hand found hers. His grip was crushing. I ain't here to hurt you. The voice was tired, almost sad. I'm Harlan, Ezra's brother. I just want to talk. Ruth's stomach dropped. Harlan. She remembered him, quiet, always standing in Ezra's shadow. Never violent himself, but never stepping in to stop it either. Please, Harlan continued. It's cold out here. I've been riding for days. The door swung open, but it wasn't Ruth who opened it. Caleb stood in the doorway, rifle trained on Harlan's chest. You got 30 seconds to explain why I shouldn't put a bullet in you. Harlan raised his hands slowly. He was younger than Ruth remembered, mid-30s maybe, with the same dark hair as Ezra, but softer features. Exhaustion carved lines around his eyes. I ain't armed, he said. Check if you want. Caleb stepped forward and patted him down with rough efficiency. Finding nothing, he stepped back, but kept the rifle raised. Talk. Harlan's eyes moved past him, searching the room, until they found Ruth huddled against the wall. Ruth, he breathed. Thank God. I thought, why are you here? Ruth's voice was harder than she'd ever heard it. Did Ezra send you? Yes and no. Harlan swallowed. He's looking for you, tearing the country apart. But I came ahead because... He stopped, gathered himself. Because I need to warn you. Warn her about what? Caleb demanded. Harlan's face went gray. He's not just looking anymore. He's got a warrant. Ruth felt the ground tilt beneath her. A warrant. Abandonment. Theft. Kidnapping. Harlan's voice was hollow. He convinced a judge back in Kansas that you stole the children, that you're unfit, that he's the victim. That's a lie. Ruth's voice shook with fury. He beat me. He nearly killed Benny. I know. Harlan's voice cracked. I know what he did. I saw it. I was too much of a coward to stop it. Silence fell, heavy, suffocating. Caleb lowered the rifle slightly. Why are you really here? Harlan looked at the floor. Because I can't live with myself anymore. His voice was barely a whisper. 3 years I watched my brother hurt this woman. Hurt those kids. I told myself it wasn't my business. Told myself family's family. He looked up, and Ruth saw tears in his eyes. Then he put that baby in the hospital. And I realized family don't mean nothing if it makes you a monster too. Ruth's hand pressed against her chest. Benny wasn't the doctor said he'd be fine. The first doctor maybe, but after you left, Ezra took him to another one. Got papers saying the boy had brain damage, made it look like you'd been hurting him. Ruth's vision went white. No. He's building a case. Harlan's voice was urgent now. Against you. He's gonna claim you're crazy, violent, dangerous. He's gonna take those kids and... He's lying. Ruth was on her feet, hands shaking. Every word out of his mouth is a lie. I know that. You know that. Harlan stepped closer. But a judge in Kansas don't know it, and Ezra's got friends everywhere. Caleb moved between them, his body shielding Ruth. Where is he now? 2 days behind me. Maybe 3. Harlan rubbed his face. He's gathering men. Says he's coming to take back what's his. His? Ruth's voice was deadly. Those are my children. In his mind, you're all his property. Harlan's eyes met hers. That's why I came. To warn you. To help if I can. Why should we trust you? Sammy's voice rang out from behind Ruth. You watched him hurt us for years. Harlan flinched like he'd been struck. You're right. His voice was ragged. I got no right to ask for trust. But I know things. Things that could help. What things? Caleb demanded. Harlan hesitated. Then he reached into his coat slowly, carefully, and pulled out a bundle of papers. Letters, he said. From women in 3 different towns. Women Ezra hurt before Ruth. Women he paid off or scared into silence. Ruth took the papers with trembling hands. She unfolded the first one, scanned the cramped handwriting. Her stomach heaved. There are others, she whispered. At least 3 that I know of. One's dead now, accident, he called it. The other 2 disappeared. Harlan's jaw tightened. My brother ain't just a bad husband, Ruth. He's a bad man, and those letters prove it. Caleb took the papers from Ruth's shaking hands. His face went harder with every page. This is evidence, he said quietly. Real evidence. Enough to get that warrant thrown out. Maybe enough to put him in prison. Harlan looked at Ruth. But only if you fight. Only if you stand up in front of a judge and tell the truth. She'd have to go back to Kansas, Caleb said flatly. Eventually, yes. And Ezra would be there. That's why I'm here. Harlan straightened. To testify, to tell them what I saw, what I should have stopped. Ruth stared at him. This man who'd stood by while her husband broke her, who'd looked away when she screamed, who'd done nothing while her children learned to hide from their own father. Why now? She asked. After all this time, why help me now? Harlan was quiet for a long moment. Because last month Ezra got engaged. Ruth's heart stopped. What? To a widow in town. Nice woman. 2 young boys. Harlan's voice was hollow. And I saw the way he looked at her like he was already planning how to break her. His hands clenched into fists. I couldn't save you, Ruth. God forgive me, I was too weak. But I can stop him from doing it again. I can make sure he never hurts another woman. Ruth looked at this broken man who'd come through a blizzard to make amends. She should hate him. Part of her did. But another part, the part that had learned to survive, saw something she recognized. Someone trying to claw their way back from the darkness. Where can we find these women? She asked quietly. The ones who survived. Harlan's face flooded with relief. I have addresses, names, everything you need. Caleb looked at Ruth. This is your decision. Ruth thought of Sammy watching Caleb with suspicious eyes. Grace silent and wounded. Benny still sometimes flinching when someone moved too fast. She thought of another woman, another set of children falling into Ezra's trap. I'll do it, she said. I'll fight. Caleb nodded once. Then he turned to Harlan. You can sleep in the barn. Tomorrow we plan. Harlan picked up his hat. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Caleb's voice was steel. If you're lying, if this is some kind of trap, I'll put you in the ground myself. I ain't lying. Harlan met his eyes steadily. On my mother's grave, I ain't lying. He walked out into the cold, leaving silence behind. Sammy broke it first. You believe him, Mama? Ruth looked at her son. This boy who'd seen too much grown up too fast, carried burdens no child should carry. I don't know, she said honestly. But I believe he's scared, and scared men sometimes do the right thing. And if he's working with Pa... Ruth knelt down, taking Sammy's face in her hands. Then we'll deal with it. Together. Like we deal with everything. Sammy's eyes glistened. I'm tired of being scared. I know, baby. So am I. She pulled him into her arms and held him tight, this boy who'd become her protector when she should have been protecting him. Caleb watched them from across the room. His face was unreadable, but his eyes held something that made Ruth's heart ache. Not pity. Understanding. The understanding of someone who knew what it meant to fight for family. That night, sleep didn't come. Ruth lay on her cot staring at the ceiling while her children slept in the next room. Her mind raced through every possibility, every danger, every way this could go wrong. A soft knock at the door made her sit up. "It's me." Caleb's voice low and quiet. She opened the door. He stood in the hallway, fully dressed, rifle over his shoulder. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. "Don't plan to, not tonight." Ruth wrapped her shawl tighter. "You don't have to." "Yeah, I do." He leaned against the doorframe. "Harlan seems sincere, but I don't trust him yet. Don't trust anyone when it comes to your safety." "Why?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. The same question she'd asked before, but different now. Deeper. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. 10 years ago, he said finally. I came home to find my wife and daughter already buried. Neighbors had done it because they didn't think I'd make it back in time. Ruth's chest tightened. I stood at their graves and I made a promise. Said I'd never let anyone I cared about face danger alone again. He looked at her, and the raw pain in his eyes made her breath catch. Didn't think I'd ever have the chance to keep that promise. Caleb, I ain't saying this to make you feel obligated. I'm saying it because you need to understand. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. I'm in this now. All the way. Whatever comes through that door, it's gonna have to go through me first. Ruth's eyes burned with tears she refused to shed. You barely know me. I know enough. His voice was rough. I know you ran into a blizzard with 3 children rather than let them be hurt. I know you work harder than any hand I've ever hired. I know you sing to your little one when you think nobody's listening. He reached out, hesitated, then brushed a strand of hair from her face. I know you're the bravest woman I've ever met. Ruth couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but stand there while her heart cracked open. Get some sleep, Caleb said softly. I'll keep watch. He turned to go. Caleb. He paused. Thank you. The words felt inadequate, pathetic, but they were all she had. For everything. He looked back at her, and something passed between them. Something wordless and terrifying and beautiful. Ain't no thanks needed, he said. Just doing what's right. Then he was gone, his footsteps fading down the hall. Ruth closed the door and pressed her back against it. Her heart hammered in her chest. She was falling for him. This quiet, broken man who'd opened his door to strangers, who asked nothing in return, who stood guard while she slept. It was dangerous, foolish. She was still legally married to a monster who was coming to destroy her. But for the first time in years, Ruth felt something other than fear. Hope. Morning brought clarity and chaos in equal measure. Ruth woke to find Caleb and Harlan bent over the kitchen table, papers spread between them. They were talking in low voices, tracing routes on a map. You're awake. Caleb looked up. Good. We need to talk. Ruth poured herself coffee and sat down. The letters Harlan had brought were organized into neat piles. I've been thinking, Harlan said. If we're going to fight Ezra in court, we need more than just my testimony. The letters aren't enough. They'll help, but a judge might say they're hearsay, or that I forged them. Harlan shook his head. We need the women themselves, live witnesses willing to testify. Ruth's heart sank. They've been hiding for years. Why would they come forward now? Because now they're not alone. Caleb's voice was firm. Before it was each woman against Ezra. Now it's all of them together. That changes things. And you think they'll agree? Only one way to find out. Harlan tapped the map. Mary Hollister is in Denver. Sarah Crane is in Cheyenne. If we can get to them before Ezra... Wait. Ruth held up a hand. You mean... I mean someone needs to go. Harlan looked at her steadily. Someone those women will trust. Me. You're the only one who understands what they went through. The only one who can convince them it's safe to speak. Ruth's mind reeled. Leave the ranch. Leave her children. I'll stay with the kids. Caleb's voice was steady. Ain't nobody getting past me. But if Ezra comes while I'm gone, then I'll handle him. Caleb's eyes were flint. You focus on building the case. I'll focus on keeping your children alive. Ruth looked between the two men. Part of her wanted to refuse, to barricade herself in this house and wait for the storm to pass. But storms didn't pass. They had to be weathered. How long? She asked. Week, maybe 2. Harlan studied the map. If we move fast. And who goes with me? Silence. I'll go, Harlan said finally. I know these women. They've seen my face before. It might help. Or it might remind them of Ezra. Maybe. Harlan's voice was heavy. But it's the best chance we got. Ruth looked at Caleb. What do you think? He was quiet for a long moment. I think you're right to be cautious, he said finally. But I also think Harlan's telling the truth. He's got shame in his eyes, can't fake that. He stood and crossed to the window. Go. Find these women. Build your case. He turned back and his eyes were fierce. I'll be here when you get back, and so will your children. Ruth rose, walked to him, stopped close enough to touch. Swear it, she whispered. Swear you'll keep them safe. Caleb took her hand. His grip was warm, solid, real. I swear on my wife's grave, he said quietly. On my daughter's. They'll come to no harm. Ruth nodded. She believed him. God help her, she believed him completely. Telling the children was the hardest part. Sammy's face went white when Ruth explained. You're leaving us. Not leaving. Going to get help. Ruth knelt before him. To make sure your father can never hurt any of us again. But what if he comes while you're gone? Mr. Thornton will protect you. He's a stranger. He's not. Ruth took Sammy's hands. Not anymore. She struggled for words. He's good, Sammy. Really good. I need you to trust me on that. Sammy's jaw worked. His eyes glistened. You always say that. About men. You said it about Pa too at the beginning. The words hit like a slap. Ruth sucked in a breath. You're right. I did. And I was wrong about your father. So wrong. But Caleb... She shook her head. Caleb isn't your father. He's nothing like your father. How do you know? Because your father never stayed up all night to keep us safe, never gave up his bed for strangers, never asked me what I thought instead of telling me what to do. Sammy stared at her. His young face was old with doubt, but slowly something shifted. Okay, he whispered. Okay, Mama, I'll try. Ruth pulled him into a fierce embrace. That's all I ask. Just try. Grace and Benny took it differently. Benny cried and clung to her legs until Ruth thought her heart would shatter. She held him and whispered promises she prayed she could keep. Grace said nothing. But as Ruth was packing, the girl slipped something into her bag. A drawing. Stick figures under a crooked roof. 4 small shapes and 2 larger ones. Family. Ruth's eyes burned. This is beautiful, she whispered. Grace just looked at her with those 2 old eyes. Then so soft Ruth almost missed it. Come back. 2 words. The first she'd spoken in weeks. Ruth crushed her daughter against her chest. I will, she choked. I promise, I will. The morning she left, Caleb walked her to the wagon where Harlan waited. You got the letters? Yes. The money? Yes. The pistol I gave you? Ruth patted her coat. Yes. Caleb nodded. But he didn't step back. Ruth. She looked up at him. This man, who'd become so much more than an employer in such a short time. Be careful, he said. Whatever happens out there, just be careful. I will. And Ruth? Yes. He hesitated. Then so quickly she barely registered it, he leaned down and pressed a kiss to her forehead. Hurry back, he murmured against her skin. Then he stepped away and walked back to the house without looking back. Ruth climbed into the wagon, her forehead still burning where his lips had touched. Ready? Harlan asked. Ruth looked back at the ranch, at the three small faces pressed against the window, at the tall figure standing guard on the porch. Ready, she said. The wagon lurched forward, carrying her away from everything she'd started to love, and toward a battle she wasn't sure she could win. Behind her, Caleb stood on the porch until she disappeared over the horizon. He didn't know it yet, but the real fight was just beginning. And it was coming straight for his door. 3 days after Ruth left, they came. Caleb saw the dust rising on the ridge just after noon. 4 riders moving fast, not bothering to hide their approach. Sammy! His voice was calm, controlled. Get your brother and sister into the cellar. The boy didn't argue, didn't question. He grabbed Benny's hand and pulled Grace toward the back of the house. Don't come out until I tell you, Caleb called after them. No matter what you hear. The cellar door slammed shut. Caleb checked his rifle, loaded his pistol, positioned himself on the porch and waited. The riders pulled up at the gate. 4 men, rough-weathered guns on their hips. The one in front was different from the others. Cleaner, more polished. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Afternoon, the man called. You Caleb Thornton? Who's asking? Name's Grady. Deputy Grady out of Kansas. He tapped the badge on his chest. Looking for a woman named Ruth McAllister and her 3 children. Got a warrant for her arrest. Caleb's grip tightened on his rifle. Ain't no one here by that name. That's so. Grady's smile widened. Because we tracked her wagon right to this property. Snow's funny that way, keeps secrets real good until the sun comes out. You tracked wrong. Did we? Grady leaned forward in his saddle. See, we got a concerned husband back in Kansas. Says his wife took his children and ran off. Says she's dangerous, unstable. Might hurt those kids if someone don't stop her. Caleb's blood ran cold. That's a lie. Maybe, maybe not. Either way, I got a legal document says I'm within my rights to search this property. He held up a folded paper. You gonna cooperate, or we gonna do this the hard way? Caleb looked at the 4 men, looked at their guns, calculated the odds. Not good. Not good at all. But the children were in the cellar, and Ruth was counting on him. You can search all you want, he said slowly. But you ain't taking nobody without going through me first. Grady's smile faded. That's a real brave thing to say, Mr. Thornton. Real stupid, too. He nodded to his men. They dismounted and started toward the house. Caleb raised his rifle. That's far enough. The men stopped. Hands drifted toward holsters. Now! Grady held up a hand. No need for gunplay. We're just doing our jobs, legal and proper. There ain't nothing legal about kidnapping children for a man who beats them. Grady's eyes flickered, just for a moment. Then the mask was back. That's a serious accusation. It's the truth. I got witnesses, letters from other women this man hurt, evidence that would put him in prison if the right people saw it. Grady was quiet for a long moment. Where are these letters? Safe, where you'll never find them. And the woman Ruth McAllister. Caleb smiled grimly. Gone. Gathering more evidence. Building a case that's gonna bring your employer to his knees. The word hit like a bullet. Grady's face changed. The pretense dropped away, leaving something cold and calculating underneath. You think you're clever, he said quietly. You think you know what you're dealing with. But Ezra McAllister is a powerful man. He's got connections in every courthouse from here to Washington. And I've got 3 children who trust me to keep them alive. Children who belong with their father. Children who their father put in the hospital. Grady's jaw tightened. Last chance, Thornton. Hand them over and we walk away clean. Nobody gets hurt. Everybody goes home. The only people walking away are you and your men. Right now." Silence stretched between them. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of snow, and something else, tension thick as smoke. Then Grady smiled. "Wrong answer." His hand moved toward his gun. Caleb fired first. The shot took out Grady's hat, sent it spinning into the dirt. The deputy froze hand halfway to his holster. "Next one goes through your skull," Caleb said calmly. "You want to test me?" Grady's face twisted with fury. "You're making a mistake." "Wouldn't be my first." Caleb's rifle didn't waver. "Now get off my property. Tell your boss if he wants those kids, he can come get them himself. I'll be waiting." For a long, terrible moment, Caleb thought Grady would draw anyway, would force a confrontation that could only end in blood. Then the deputy raised his hands slowly. "Mount up," he said to his men. "We're leaving." The riders climbed back on their horses. Grady paused at the gate. "This ain't over, Thornton. Not by a long shot." "I know." Grady rode away, leaving silence and snow in his wake. Caleb waited until they disappeared over the ridge. Then his legs gave out. He sat on the porch steps, rifle across his knees, hands shaking, his heart hammered in his chest. He'd just declared war on a man with the law in his pocket. God help them all. The cellar door creaked open. "Mr. Thornton." Sammy's voice was small. "Is it safe?" Caleb took a breath, steadied himself. "It's safe. Come on out." The children emerged one by one. Benny clutched his sister's hand, eyes wide with terror. Grace was pale but silent. Sammy moved in front of them, protective even now. "Who were those men?" the boy demanded. "Nobody you need to worry about. They came for us. For Mama." Caleb couldn't lie. Not to this boy who'd learned too young that adults couldn't be trusted. "Yes," he said quietly. "They did." Sammy's face crumpled. Just for a second. Then the mask was back. "Will they come again?" "Probably." "What are we gonna do?" Caleb looked at the three children standing before him. These strangers who'd become something else. Something precious. "We're gonna fight," he said. "And we're gonna win." Sammy stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "Okay." It wasn't trust. Not yet. But it was a start. That night, Caleb moved the children's beds into the main room. He barricaded the doors, set traps on the paths leading to the house, loaded every gun he owned. If they came back, he'd be ready. The children watched him work, saying nothing. But when Benny climbed into his lap that evening, Caleb didn't push him away. "I'm scared," the boy whispered. "I know." Caleb's voice was rough. "It's okay to be scared." Pa used to say being scared was for weak people. Your pa was wrong about a lot of things. Benny was quiet for a moment. Then, "You're not like Pa." The words hit Caleb like a fist. "No," he said softly. "I'm not." "You're good." Caleb's throat tightened. "I try to be." "Will you stay? Even when Mama comes back?" The question hung in the air. Innocent. Devastating. Caleb thought about his empty house. His empty life. The 10 years he'd spent waiting for something worth living for. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I'll stay." Benny smiled, the first real smile Caleb had seen from him, and snuggled deeper into his arms. Across the room, Sammy watched them. His expression was unreadable. But for the first time, there was no hostility in his eyes. 200 miles away, Ruth found her first witness. Mary Hollister lived in a boarding house on the edge of Denver. She was 35, gray-haired before her time, with eyes that had seen too much. When Ruth knocked on her door, Mary didn't open it. "Who's there?" "Ruth McAllister. I was married to Ezra." Silence. Then the sound of locks clicking open. Mary's face appeared in the crack. Her expression was guarded, Haunted. You're alive. Yes. He didn't kill you. Not for lack of trying. Mary studied her for a long moment. Then she opened the door wider. Come in, quick, before someone sees. The room was small, sparse. A single bed, a washstand, a chair by the window. Mary stood with her arms wrapped around herself. I heard he got married again. After me. I know. I prayed for her, whoever she was, prayed she'd be smarter than me, stronger. I wasn't. Ruth's voice cracked. But I got out, eventually. Mary's eyes filled with tears. The children? Safe. For now. But he's coming for them. Of course he is. Mary laughed bitterly. That's what he does. Takes and takes until there's nothing left. Ruth stepped closer. I have letters. Testimony from Harlan, his brother. But I need more. I need women who'll stand up and tell the truth about what he did. Mary's face went pale. You want me to testify? Yes. In court, in front of him? Yes. Mary shook her head frantically. I can't. You don't understand. Her voice broke. He said he'd kill me if I ever talked. Said he'd make it look like an accident. Like Jenny. Jenny, the woman before me. Mary's eyes were wild. She tried to go to the sheriff. A week later she fell down a well, drowned. Everyone said it was an accident. Ruth's blood ran cold. He murdered her. I can't prove it, but I know. I know. Mary grabbed Ruth's hands. Please, I want to help. I do. But I can't die. Not after everything I survived. Ruth looked at this broken woman, saw herself in the trembling hands, the haunted eyes. What if you weren't alone? Mary blinked. What if there were others? Women who could stand together. Women who could finally tell the truth without being afraid. He'd destroy us all. Or we'd destroy him. Ruth's grip tightened. Mary, please. I have children who will never be safe until this man is stopped. You must have dreamed about this. About finally fighting back. Mary was quiet for a long moment. Every night, she whispered. Every single night. Then help me. Please. Tears streamed down Mary's face. If I do this, she said slowly. If I testify, you promise I won't be alone. I promise. Mary closed her eyes. Her whole body trembled. Then she nodded. Okay. I'll do it. Ruth pulled her into a fierce embrace. 1 down, 2 to go. Finding Sarah Crane was harder. She'd moved 3 times in the past year, always 1 step ahead of something. Or someone. Finally, Harlan tracked her to a farm outside Cheyenne. She worked as a seamstress for the family there, living in a room above the barn. When Ruth and Harlan arrived, Sarah was hanging laundry in the yard. She saw them coming and froze. Sarah, Ruth called. Sarah Crane. The woman dropped the sheet she was holding and ran. Wait. Ruth chased after her. Please wait. Sarah was fast, but Ruth was desperate. She caught up at the edge of the property, grabbing Sarah's arm. Let me go. Sarah clawed at her. Please, let me go. I'm not going to hurt you, I swear. I just need to talk. He sent you. Ezra sent you. No. Ruth's voice was fierce. Ezra is trying to destroy me, just like he destroyed you. Sarah stopped struggling. Her eyes, green terrified, searched Ruth's face. You know Ezra. I was married to him. For 3 years. Until he nearly killed my son. Sarah's face crumpled. The little one, the baby. He threw him against a wall. Split his head open. Ruth's voice shook. That's when I ran. Sarah stared at her. Then slowly she started to cry. He did the same thing to me, she whispered. To my daughter. She didn't survive. Ruth felt the ground tilt beneath her. Oh God. He said it was an accident. Everyone believed him. Sarah's voice was hollow. And I was too broken to fight. So I ran. And I've been running ever since. Ruth took Sarah's hands. You don't have to run anymore. Yes, I do. He finds everyone eventually. I'm building a case against him. A real case. With evidence and witnesses. I already have Mary Hollister. Sarah's breath caught. Mary? She's agreed to testify. So has Harlan. Ruth squeezed her hands. We can finally make him pay for what he did. For all of it. Sarah shook her head. It won't work. The courts are rigged. The judges are his friends. Then we'll go to the newspapers. We'll make so much noise that no judge can ignore it. He'll kill us. He'll try. Ruth's voice hardened. But I'd rather die fighting than spend another day running. Sarah looked at her for a long moment. Her face was a battlefield fear, fighting with anger, despair, fighting with hope. My daughter's name was Emma, she said quietly. She was 4 years old. Ruth's eyes burned. I'm so sorry. I want him to pay. Sarah's voice cracked. God help me. I want him to suffer like I've suffered. Then help me. Stand with Mary and me and tell the world what he is. Sarah closed her eyes. A shudder ran through her body. When she opened them again, they were clear, determined. Where do I need to be? Ruth pulled her into an embrace. You're not alone anymore, she whispered. None of us are. The ride back to Wyoming felt endless. Ruth had the witnesses, had the evidence, had everything she needed to destroy Ezra in court. But something gnawed at her. A cold dread that grew with every mile. Something was wrong. She could feel it in her bones. You're quiet, Harlan said on the third day. Just thinking. About what? Ruth stared at the horizon. We've been gone almost 2 weeks. Ezra's men found the ranch days ago. What if Thornton can handle himself? Against 4 men against Ezra. Harlan was silent. I should have stayed, Ruth whispered. I should never have left them. If you'd stayed, you'd have nothing to fight with. No witnesses. No case. Nothing. And if something happened to them while I was gone... Harlan didn't answer. Because there was no answer. They rode faster after that. The ranch came into view on the 6th day. Ruth saw the smoke first, rising from the chimney. A good sign. A living sign. Then she saw the figures on the porch. 3 small shapes. 1 tall one, her children. Alive. Mama! Benny spotted her first. He came running across the snow arms, outstretched face bright with joy. Ruth leaped from the wagon and caught him mid-air. Mama! Mama! You came back! Of course I came back. She was crying. Couldn't stop. I promised, didn't I? Grace was next silent as always, but clinging to Ruth so tight she could barely breathe. Then Sammy trying to be brave, trying to be strong, but crumpling into her arms like the child he still was. Ruth held them all, her 3 precious miracles, and sobbed into their hair. Footsteps approached. She looked up. Caleb stood before her and something was wrong. His arm was in a sling. A gash ran across his forehead half-healed. Dark circles rimmed his eyes. What happened? Ruth's voice was sharp with fear. What did they do? They came back. Caleb's voice was rough. 5 nights ago. More of them this time. Are you the children? We're fine. Fought them off. He smiled grimly. Wasn't easy. Ruth crossed to him, touched his wounded arm. You're hurt. Bullet grazed me. Could have been worse. You could have been killed. Yeah. His eyes met hers. But I wasn't, and neither were they. Ruth's heart swelled. Thank you. The words felt impossibly small. Thank you. I told you I'd keep them safe. Caleb reached up, cupped her face with his good hand. I keep my promises. Ruth leaned into his touch. This man who'd nearly died for children that weren't his. Ruth. Caleb's voice dropped. There's something else. The cold dread returned. What? Grady the deputy. He's been talking to people in town, spreading lies about you, turning folks against us. What kind of lies? That you're crazy, violent, that you kidnapped your own children from a loving father. His jaw tightened. Some people are believing it. Ruth's stomach dropped. And Ezra. Caleb's face went hard. He's here, rode into Miller's Creek yesterday. He's been telling everyone who'll listen that he just wants his family back. Ruth felt the blood drain from her face. He's here, 3 miles away. Caleb's grip on her shoulder tightened. And he ain't leaving until he gets what he came for. Ruth looked at her children, at the man who'd fought for them, at the home she'd started to love. Ezra was here. The monster had finally caught up. And the final battle was about to begin. Ruth didn't sleep that night. She sat by the window, watching the darkness, waiting for shadows to move. Every creak of the floorboards made her jump. Every gust of wind sounded like approaching hoofbeats. Ezra was 3 miles away. 3 miles. She could walk that distance in an hour. He could ride it in minutes. Ruth. She turned. Caleb stood in the doorway, his wounded arm pressed against his chest. You should rest. Can't. He crossed to her, moving carefully. The bullet graze was healing, but he still carried himself like a man who'd been in a war. Because he had been. For her. We're gonna get through this, he said quietly. How do you know? Because I've seen what you're capable of. His good hand found her shoulder. You crossed 3 states with 3 children and nothing but hope. You convinced 2 terrified women to stand up against their worst nightmare. You built a case that can destroy him. A case doesn't stop bullets. No, but it stops lies, and lies are his real weapon. Ruth looked at him. This man who'd nearly died for children that weren't his, who'd fought off armed men with a rifle and stubbornness. Why are you doing this? She whispered. Really, the truth. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Because 10 years ago I couldn't save my family, couldn't protect them, couldn't even be there when they needed me most. His voice cracked. Every day since then I've carried that weight, wondered if there was any point in going on. He looked at her, and his eyes held something raw and broken and beautiful. Then you showed up at my door. 3 scared kids, and a woman brave enough to run from a monster. His hand moved to her face, gentle as a prayer, and I realized maybe this is why I survived. Maybe this is what I was waiting for. Ruth's eyes burned. Caleb. You don't have to say anything. Just know whatever happens tomorrow, I don't regret a single moment. She kissed him. Not planned, not careful. Just desperate and fierce and full of everything she couldn't put into words. He kissed her back, his good arm pulling her close, his body warm against hers. When they finally broke apart, both were trembling. Stay, Ruth whispered. Please, just for tonight. Are you sure? She nodded. Caleb led her to the bedroom. They lay together fully clothed, holding each other against the darkness. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, 2 broken people found comfort in each other's arms. Morning came gray and cold. Ruth woke to the sound of horses. She bolted upright, heart hammering. Caleb was already at the window, rifle in hand. How many? Ruth demanded. 1. Caleb's voice was confused. Just 1. Ruth moved beside him and looked out. A woman rode toward the ranch. Young, blonde, dressed in clothes too fine for the weather. Who is that? Ruth breathed. Caleb shook his head. Never seen her before. The woman stopped at the gate and dismounted. She looked around nervously, then started toward the house. Stay with the children, Caleb said. I'll handle this. Ruth nodded, but she moved to the doorway where she could watch. Caleb stepped onto the porch. Can I help you, ma'am? The woman's face was pale. young early 20s maybe, with dark circles under her eyes. I'm looking for Ruth McAllister. Caleb's grip tightened on his rifle. Who's asking? My name is Caroline. The woman swallowed hard. Caroline Whitfield. I'm engaged to Ezra. Ruth's blood ran cold. She pushed past Caleb before he could stop her. What do you want? Caroline's eyes widened. She took in Ruth's face, her defensive posture, the fear she couldn't quite hide. You're her, Caroline breathed. You're the one who ran. I asked what you want. Caroline's composure cracked. To warn you. Her voice shook. He's coming. Tonight. With men. Lots of men. Ruth felt the ground shift beneath her. Why would you warn me? Because I know what he is now. Caroline's eyes filled with tears. He hit me. Last week. First time, but... She touched her cheek reflexively. But I know it won't be the last. Ruth's heart clenched. Come inside. I can't stay long. If he knows I'm here. Inside. Now. Caroline obeyed. She sat at the kitchen table, hands trembling around the cup of coffee Ruth pressed into them. Start from the beginning, Ruth said. Caroline took a shaky breath. I met Ezra 6 months ago. He was charming, attentive, said he'd been wronged by his first wife, that she'd stolen his children. Her voice broke. I believed him. God help me, I believed every word. When did you know? A month ago. He got drunk and started talking about you, about what he was going to do when he found you. Caroline's face went white. The things he said I knew then. I knew he was a monster. But you stayed. I was scared. Where would I go? Who would believe me? Caroline looked up and Ruth saw herself in those frightened eyes. Then I heard Harlan was helping you. Heard you were building a case. I thought maybe there's hope. Ruth sat across from her. What do you know? Exactly. Everything. Caroline's voice steadied. I know where he keeps his money. I know which judges he's paid off. I know the names of the men he's hired to find you. You'll testify to all this? Yes. Caroline's chin lifted. He took my future. I want to take his. Ruth reached across the table and took her hands. You're brave, she said quietly. Braver than you know. Caroline's eyes glistened. I'm terrified. So am I. But we're not alone anymore. Caleb cleared his throat from the doorway. Ladies, we got a bigger problem. She said tonight. That's not much time. What do you suggest? Ruth asked. We can't fight off an army. Not just the two of us. He paused. We need help. From who? The town already believes his lies. Not everyone. Caleb's jaw tightened. Pastor Whitmore's been quiet, but he ain't stupid. And Martha Gibson, she's been asking questions about you. Good questions. You think they'd stand with us? Only one way to find out. Ruth looked at the children's bedroom door, at Caroline still shaking, at Caleb, wounded but determined. Then let's find out. Town was 20 minutes away. Ruth left the children with Harlan, who'd arrived at dawn with supplies and a grim expression. If Ezra comes before I'm back, I'll hold him off. Harlan's voice was steady. Long as I can. Harlan, go. He cut her off. Every minute counts. Ruth rode with Caleb and Caroline. The town appeared through the snow, small, weathered, full of people who'd believed her husband's lies. She had never been more afraid. Pastor Whitmore lived in a modest house behind the church. He opened the door with surprise in his eyes. Mr. Thornton, Mrs. He stopped, recognition dawning. You're Ruth McAllister. I am. The pastor's face was unreadable. You're wanted in Kansas. For crimes I didn't commit. Ruth met his eyes. I have proof, witnesses, evidence, but I need your help. What kind of help? The kind that might save 3 children's lives. Pastor Whitmore studied her for a long moment. Then he stepped back. "Come in. Tell me everything." Ruth talked for an hour. She told him about Ezra, about the beatings, about Benny's near death, about Mary and Sarah, and the other women he'd destroyed. Caroline added her voice, her story, her terror. When they finished, Pastor Whitmore sat in silence for a long time. "I've met your husband," he said finally. "Seemed like a respectable man. Monsters often do. He told me you were crazy, dangerous, that you'd hurt your own children. And you believed him." The pastor's face tightened. "I didn't know what to believe. Still don't, if I'm honest." Ruth felt her hope crumble. Then Caroline spoke. "Pastor, I'm engaged to this man. Was engaged. He hit me a week ago hard enough to leave bruises." She pulled down her collar, revealing purple marks on her shoulder. "Does that look like a respectable man to you?" The pastor's expression changed. "Lord, have mercy." "There's no mercy in him." Caroline's voice was fierce. "Only cruelty. And if you don't help stop him, Ruth's children will suffer the same fate." Pastor Whitmore looked at the bruises, at Ruth's desperate face, at Caleb standing guard by the door. "What do you need me to do?" he asked quietly. Ruth's breath caught. "Tell the town the truth. Tonight before Ezra comes. Give people a chance to see what he really is. He has supporters here, men who owe him money, men who believe his lies. And he has victims, women who stayed silent because they were scared." Ruth leaned forward. "Help me give them a voice." The pastor was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Ring the church bell at sundown. I'll gather everyone who'll listen." Ruth wanted to weep with relief. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." His face was grim. "Words don't stop bullets. And if Ezra comes with armed men, then we'll face them together." "You really believe that?" Ruth looked at Caleb, at Caroline, at the pastor with his worried eyes. "I have to," she said. "It's all I have left." The church bell rang at sundown. Ruth stood at the front of the congregation facing 24 faces, some curious, some hostile, some carefully blank. Behind her stood Caleb Harlan and Caroline. Behind them, hidden in the back pew, sat Mary Hollister and Sarah Crane, who'd arrived just an hour before. "Thank you for coming," Ruth began, her voice shaking. "I know what you've heard about me, that I'm crazy, dangerous, that I stole my own children." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Those are lies. Lies told by a man who beats women and calls it love. A man who nearly killed my 4-year-old son. A man who has destroyed at least 4 lives that I know of." "Prove it," a voice called from the back. Jedediah Crane, the shopkeeper. His face was twisted with contempt. "I intend to." Ruth gestured to Mary. "This woman was married to Ezra before me. She'll tell you what he did." Mary stood trembling, but her voice was clear. "He broke my arm twice, cracked my ribs, told everyone I was clumsy." She pulled back her sleeve, revealing old scars. "These don't come from falling." The crowd went silent. Sarah rose next. "He killed my daughter." Her voice cracked. "Made it look like an accident. She was 4 years old, the same age as Ruth's little boy when he threw him against a wall." Gasps echoed through the church. Then Caroline stepped forward. "I'm engaged to Ezra McAllister, or I was until he hit me last week." She showed her bruises. "He told me Ruth was crazy, that she'd hurt her children. Now I know the truth." "You expect us to believe this?" Jedediah's voice was sharp. "These women could be lying, could be in cahoots." "Then believe me." Everyone turned. Harlan stepped forward, his face pale but determined. "My name is Harlan McAllister. Ezra is my brother." He swallowed. "I watched him hurt Ruth for 3 years. Watched him terrorize his children. I said nothing because I was a coward. But I'm not silent anymore. The church erupted. People shouting, arguing, some crying. Pastor Whitmore raised his hands. Quiet, everyone quiet. The noise died down. I've heard enough, the pastor said. Whatever else is true, one thing is clear. Ruth McAllister is not the monster her husband claims. She's a mother protecting her children. That don't matter if Ezra comes with guns, someone called. No. Caleb's voice was iron. It don't. Which is why I'm asking who here is willing to stand with us. Silence. Long, terrible silence. Then a woman rose from the middle pew. Martha Gibson, the blacksmith's wife. I'll stand. Her husband grabbed her arm. Martha. No, Henry. She shook him off. I've been quiet too long. We all have. If we let this man take those children, we're no better than he is. Another woman rose. Then another. Then a man, old Tom Hendricks, who ran the livery stable. I ain't much for fighting, he said gruffly. But I got a shotgun, and I know how to use it. One by one people stood. Not everyone. Jedediah and his friends stayed seated, faces hard with disapproval. But enough. Enough to make a difference. Ruth's eyes burned with tears. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you. Pastor Whitmore put a hand on her shoulder. Thank us when it's over. He looked toward the door and his face went still. Which might be sooner than we thought. Ruth turned. A man stood in the doorway. Tall, dark-haired, handsome in a way that had fooled her for years. Ezra. Well, well. His voice was smooth as silk. Looks like I'm missing quite a party. The congregation froze. Ruth's heart stopped. Behind Ezra, shadows moved. Men. Armed men. More than she could count. Ezra stepped into the church, his boots echoing on the wooden floor. Hello, Ruth. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Did you really think you could hide from me forever? Ruth forced her voice steady. I'm not hiding anymore. No. Then what do you call this? He gestured at the crowd. Turning the town against me with lies. They're not lies and you know it. Do I? Ezra's eyes moved to Mary, to Sarah, to Caroline. I see you've gathered quite a collection. Bitter women with axes to grind. Women you destroyed. Women who couldn't handle a man who knew what he wanted. His voice hardened. Just like you. Caleb stepped forward. That's far enough. Ezra's gaze shifted, his lip curled. The ranch hand. I've heard about you. He laughed. Playing hero for another man's wife? She's not your wife anymore. The law says different. The law can go to hell. The tension in the room crackled like lightning. Ezra's men fanned out behind him. Hands rested on guns. Caleb's rifle rose slightly. You think you can take all of us? Ezra asked softly. Don't have to take all of you. Caleb's voice was ice. Just you. For a long moment nobody moved. Then a small voice broke the silence. Papa. Ruth's blood froze. Sammy stood in the side doorway, his face pale with shock. He must have followed them, must have hidden in the wagon. Sammy. Ruth's voice was sharp with terror. Run! But it was too late. Ezra's face split into a predator's grin. There's my boy. He moved faster than Ruth expected and grabbed Sammy before anyone could react. No! Ruth screamed. Ezra held her son against his chest, one arm locked around the boy's throat. Now, he said calmly. Let's discuss this like civilized people. Sammy struggled, but Ezra was too strong. Let him go! Ruth lunged forward. Ezra's arm tightened. Sammy gasped. Another step and I snap his neck. Ruth froze. The whole church froze. Here's what's going to happen, Ezra continued. Ruth is coming with me. So are the children. Anyone who tries to stop us. He smiled. Well, let's just say my men are very good at their jobs. You won't get away with this, Caleb growled. I already have. Ezra's eyes were dead. I always do. Ruth looked at her son, at his terrified face, at the arm crushing his throat. She'd spent 3 years being afraid of this man, no more. Ezra. Her voice was suddenly calm, too calm. He frowned. What? Let him go. Take me instead. Ruth. Caleb's voice was anguished. Shut up. She didn't look away from Ezra. You want me fine, but the children stay. They stay here safe with people who'll protect them. Ezra laughed. You think you're in a position to bargain? I think you want me more than you want them. Ruth stepped closer. You always did. The children were just levers, ways to control me. Something flickered in Ezra's eyes. Recognition, maybe respect. You've gotten smarter. I've gotten desperate. Ruth was close now, close enough to touch. Let him go, Ezra. Let them all go, and I'll come quietly. Mama, no. Sammy's voice was raw with terror. It's okay, baby. Ruth met her son's eyes. I love you. Remember that, no matter what happens. Ezra studied her for a long moment. Then slowly, he released Sammy. The boy stumbled forward. Caleb caught him, pulled him back. Ezra's hand closed around Ruth's wrist. Smart choice, he murmured. Ruth? Caleb's voice broke. She looked at him. This man she'd started to love. Take care of them, she said. Promise me. I won't let him. Promise me. His face crumpled. I promise. Ezra pulled Ruth toward the door. His men closed ranks around them. She didn't fight, didn't resist. She'd bought her children time. That was all that mattered. The church doors opened. Cold air rushed in. And from the darkness outside a voice rang out. Ezra McAllister. This is Sheriff Wheeler from Kansas. You're under arrest. Ezra's face went white. Ruth's heart stopped. Then the night exploded into chaos. Ezra's grip tightened on Ruth's wrist until the bones ground together. This is a mistake, he hissed. The only mistake was letting you walk free this long. Sheriff Wheeler stepped into the light, 6 deputies flanking him. Ezra McAllister, you're under arrest for assault fraud and the murder of Jenny Crane. Murder. The word echoed through the church like a gunshot. Ezra's face twisted. You have no proof. We have witnesses, letters, and your brother's testimony. Wheeler's eyes were hard as flint. It's over. Ezra laughed, a cold, ugly sound. You think this changes anything? I have lawyers, connections. I'll be out before... Before what? Ruth's voice cut through his bluster. She wrenched her wrist free, stepping back. Before you can hurt someone else. Before you can kill another woman. Shut up. No. Ruth's voice shook with fury. I spent 3 years being silent. 3 years being afraid. Not anymore. She turned to face the congregation, the witnesses, the townspeople, everyone who'd come to stand with her. This man put my son in the hospital. He broke Mary's arm twice. He murdered Sarah's daughter. And he would have done the same to me if I hadn't run. Her eyes found Ezra's. I'm not running anymore. Ezra lunged. His men moved with him, drawing weapons, creating chaos. The church erupted into screaming. But Caleb was faster. He tackled Ezra before the man could reach Ruth. They crashed into Pugh's fists, flying wood splintering under their weight. Wheeler's deputies engaged Ezra's men. Gunfire cracked. Someone screamed. Ruth grabbed Sammy, pulling him toward the back of the church where Grace and Benny huddled with Harlan. Get them out, she shouted. What about you? Harlan yelled back. Go! He didn't argue. He swept Benny into his arms, grabbed Grace's hand, and ran. Ruth turned back to the fight. Caleb and Ezra were on their feet now, circling each other. Blood ran from Caleb's lip. Ezra's eye was swelling shut. You should have stayed out of this. Ezra snarled. "You should have been a better man." Ezra threw a punch. Caleb dodged, countered, connected. Ezra staggered back. "She's not worth dying for," Ezra spat. "She's worth everything." Something flickered in Ezra's eyes. Surprise, maybe fear. Then he pulled a knife. "Caleb!" Ruth screamed. Ezra slashed. Caleb twisted, but the blade caught his side. He grunted, hand flying to the wound. Ezra smiled. "Not so tough now, are you?" He raised the knife again. Ruth didn't think. She grabbed the nearest object, a heavy brass candlestick, and swung. The impact was sickening. Ezra crumpled to his knees, the knife clattering from his fingers. Ruth stood over him, chest heaving, the candlestick still clutched in her white-knuckled grip. "You don't get to hurt anyone else," she said. "Ever again." Ezra looked up at her. Blood ran from his temple. His eyes were dazed, confused. "Ruth, don't." Her voice cracked. "Don't say my name. Don't look at me. Don't—" She couldn't finish. The candlestick fell from her numb fingers. Strong arms caught her from behind. "I've got you." Caleb's voice rough with pain. "It's over. I've got you." Ruth turned and buried her face in his chest. Behind them, Wheeler's deputies subdued the last of Ezra's men. The sheriff himself snapped handcuffs around Ezra's wrists. "Get him out of here," Wheeler ordered. They dragged Ezra to his feet. He didn't fight, just stared at Ruth with eyes full of hatred and something else. Defeat. "This isn't over," he said. "Yeah," Ruth replied quietly. "It is." They took him away. The church fell silent. Ruth stood in Caleb's arms, trembling, unable to believe it was finally done. "Ruth," Mary's voice hesitant. Are you all right?" Ruth looked up. Mary and Sarah stood together holding each other. Caroline hovered nearby, face pale but relieved. "I don't know," Ruth admitted. "Ask me tomorrow." Mary laughed, a shaky, tearful sound. "Tomorrow," she agreed. "Tomorrow." The trial took place 3 weeks later. Ruth sat in the front row of the Kansas City courthouse, flanked by Mary, Sarah, and Caroline. Behind them sat Harlan, Pastor Whitmore, Martha Gibson, and 24 others who'd made the journey to bear witness. Caleb sat beside Ruth, his hand wrapped around hers. His wound had healed, though it still pulled when he moved too fast. "You don't have to be here," Ruth had told him that morning. "Yes," he'd replied. "I do." Now they waited as the jury filed back in. 12 men, 12 strangers, 12 people who would decide if justice existed or if money and power always won. Ruth's heart hammered so loud she was sure everyone could hear it. The foreman stood. "Have you reached a verdict?" the judge asked. "We have, Your Honor." "On the charge of assault and battery, how do you find guilty?" Ruth's breath caught. "On the charge of fraud and falsifying legal documents, guilty." Tears burned Ruth's eyes. "On the charge of murder in the first degree in the death of Jennifer Crane." The courtroom went silent. Ruth gripped Caleb's hand so hard her knuckles went white. "Guilty." The word echoed through the chamber. Ezra's face went gray. "No," he breathed. "No, you can't. Ezra McAllister." The judge's voice was cold. "You have been found guilty on all counts. You are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole." The gavel fell. Ruth broke. All the fear, all the pain, all the years of suffering, it crashed over her like a wave. She sobbed into Caleb's shoulder while he held her, murmuring words she couldn't quite hear. Around them people were crying. Mary, Sarah, Caroline. Even Harlan, who'd spent so long in his brother's shadow. But Ruth only had one thought. It was over. Finally, mercifully, impossibly over. They took Ezra away in chains. He didn't look at Ruth as he passed. Didn't speak. Just stared straight ahead with dead eyes. Ruth watched until he disappeared through the doors. until the last echo of his footsteps faded. Then she turned to Caleb. "Take me home." He smiled that rare, beautiful smile she'd come to treasure. "Yes, ma'am." The journey back to Wyoming took a week. Ruth spent most of it in silence, processing everything that had happened. The fear, the fight, the victory that still felt like a dream. The children rode in the wagon beside her, Sammy vigilant as always, Grace quiet but calmer, Benny chattering about everything and nothing. They were safe. That was the only thing that mattered. On the 5th day, Sammy sat beside her on the driver's bench. "Mama." "Yes, baby." "Is it really over? Is he really gone?" Ruth put her arm around him. "He's in prison, for the rest of his life. He can never hurt us again." Sammy was quiet for a long moment. "I'm glad," he said finally. "But I'm also—" He stopped. "What, honey?" "I'm scared it won't feel real. That I'll keep waiting for him to show up. Keep being afraid." Ruth's heart ached. "That's normal," she said gently. "It takes time, but you're not alone. None of us are." "Mr. Thornton's staying." Ruth looked at Caleb riding ahead on his horse. He glanced back and smiled at her soft private full of promise. "Yes," she said. "He's staying." Sammy nodded slowly. "Good." He paused. "I like him, Mama. He's different." "Different how—" "He's not pretending." Sammy's voice was certain. "When he's nice, it's real. When he says he'll protect us, he means it." Ruth pulled her son close. "I know, baby. I know." Grace spoke for the second time on the 6th day. They'd stopped to rest by a creek. Benny was throwing rocks in the water while Caleb showed Sammy how to skip stones. Ruth sat on the bank watching when a small hand slipped into hers. She looked down. Grace stood beside her, her eyes fixed on Caleb. "Mama." Ruth's heart stopped. "Yes, sweetheart." "He's going to be our new papa." The question was so matter-of-fact, so innocent, that Ruth almost laughed. "Would you like that?" Grace considered for a moment. "Yes," she said finally. "He has kind eyes." Then she pulled away and ran to join her brothers, leaving Ruth with tears streaming down her face. Kind eyes. After everything Grace had seen, after all the cruelty and violence, she still believed in kindness. Ruth watched her daughter play, and for the first time in years, she felt something she'd almost forgotten. Peace. The ranch appeared on the 7th day. Ruth saw the house rise over the hill and felt her chest tighten. This place that had been a refuge, that had become a home. "We're back," Benny shouted. "We're home, home." The word felt different now, heavier, more real. Caleb pulled his horse alongside the wagon. "Nervous?" "A little," Ruth smiled. "It feels strange, coming back as what?" She looked at him, this man, who'd risked everything for her, who'd bled for her children, who'd loved her before she knew how to let herself be loved, as someone who gets to stay. Caleb reached over and took her hand. "You get to stay forever," he said quietly. "If you want." Ruth's heart swelled. "I want." They rode into the yard together. The children tumbled out of the wagon and ran for the house, eager to reclaim their space. Ruth followed more slowly, taking in every detail: the porch Caleb had reinforced, the door he'd barricaded against intruders, the windows she'd peered through on so many sleepless nights. This was home now. Really, truly home. That night after the children were asleep, Caleb found Ruth on the porch. She was wrapped in a quilt, staring at stars, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Too much in my head." He sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Want to talk about it?" Ruth was quiet for a long moment. "I keep waiting for something to go wrong," she admitted. "Waiting for the other shoe to drop. For someone to show up and say it was all a mistake, that Ezra's free, that we have to run again. That's not going to happen." "I know, but—" She shook her head. "I don't know how to stop being afraid." Caleb turned to face her. "You don't have to stop," he said gently. "Not all at once. Fear takes time to fade. But every day, it'll get a little easier. And I'll be here, every single day." Ruth's eyes burned. Why what? Why do you love me?" The question burst out before she could stop it. "I came here with nothing. With 3 children who weren't yours, with a monster chasing me. I brought you nothing but trouble and you—" Caleb stopped her words with a kiss, soft, gentle, full of everything he couldn't say. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright. "You brought me everything," he said roughly. "You brought me a reason to keep living. You brought me a family. You brought me—" He struggled for words. "You brought me back to life, Ruth. I was dead for 10 years and you brought me back." Ruth couldn't speak, could barely breathe. "I love you," Caleb continued. "Not despite your trouble, because of it. Because you're the bravest woman I've ever known. Because you'd die for your children without a second thought. Because you looked at a broken man and saw something worth saving." He took her face in his hands. "I don't want you to be someone else. I don't want you to be perfect. I just want you, exactly as you are. Forever." Ruth's tears fell freely now. "Forever's a long time. Not long enough." Caleb smiled. "Marry me, Ruth. For real this time. Not for protection. Not for convenience. Just because I love you. Because I want to spend whatever time I have left being your husband." Ruth looked at him. This man who'd been a stranger 6 weeks ago, who'd become her protector, her partner, her heart. "Yes," she whispered. His face lit up. "Yeah. Yes." She laughed through her tears. "Yes, you stubborn, wonderful, impossible man. Yes." He kissed her again, deeper this time, full of promise and hope, and the kind of love she'd given up on ever finding. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ruth looked at the stars and felt something shift inside her. Not fear. Not waiting for the other shoe to drop. Just joy. Pure, simple, terrifying joy. "We should tell the children," she said. "In the morning." Caleb pulled her closer. "Tonight, I just want to hold you." Ruth settled against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "Caleb. Thank you. For everything. You don't have to thank me. I know, but I want to." She looked up at him. "You saved us. You saved yourselves." His voice was fierce. "I just held the door." Ruth smiled. "Then thank you for holding the door." He kissed the top of her head. "Any time." They sat together until the stars faded and dawn touched the horizon. 2 wounded people who'd found each other in the middle of a storm, ready finally to build something new. The wedding took place 3 weeks later. It was small, just the family and a few friends. Pastor Whitmore performed the ceremony in the ranch's front yard, with the children standing as witnesses. Ruth wore a simple white dress. Nothing fancy but clean and new, the first thing she'd bought for herself in years. Caleb wore his best suit, which wasn't saying much, but his eyes were bright and his hands were steady as he held hers. "Do you, Caleb James Thornton, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "And do you, Ruth Ellen McAllister, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Ruth looked at Caleb, at her children beaming behind him, at the home they'd built together from nothing. "I do." "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Caleb kissed her, and the children cheered. Benny ran to them first, wrapping his arms around both their legs. "Are you my papa now?" he asked Caleb. Caleb knelt down, meeting the boy's eyes. "If you want me to be." Benny considered this. "Will you read me stories?" "Every night." "And protect us from monsters?" "Always." Benny nodded solemnly. Then you're my papa." He launched himself into Caleb's arms. Caleb caught him, eyes glistening. Grace came next. She didn't speak, still too fragile for that, but she slipped her hand into Caleb's and squeezed. He squeezed back. Sammy was last. He stood apart, watching his young face unreadable. "Sammy." Ruth's voice was gentle. "Are you all right?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he walked to Caleb and extended his hand. "Thank you," he said, "for keeping your promise." Caleb shook his hand solemnly. "Always. I'm not ready to call you Papa yet." "That's okay. Take your time." Sammy nodded. Then slowly he stepped closer and let Caleb pull him into a hug. Ruth watched her family, her new, unexpected, perfect family, and felt her heart would burst. That evening, Martha Gibson arrived with a wagon full of food and half the town behind her. "You didn't think we'd let you celebrate alone, did you?" she demanded. The celebration lasted until midnight. There was music and dancing and more food than Ruth had seen in years. Mary and Sarah stayed close to Ruth, their faces bright with joy that matched her own. "We made it," Mary whispered at one point. "We actually made it." "We did." Ruth squeezed her hand. "And we're going to keep making it, every single day." Caroline had decided to stay in Miller's Creek. She'd found work as a seamstress and was slowly building a new life. "Thank you," she told Ruth as the party wound down, "for giving me the courage to leave. You had the courage all along. You just needed someone to remind you." Caroline hugged her tight. "I won't forget this. Ever." "I know," Ruth smiled. "Neither will I." Later, when the guests were gone and the children were asleep, Ruth and Caleb stood on the porch one last time. The night was cold but clear. Stars scattered across the sky like scattered seeds. "Ruth Thornton," Caleb said softly. "I like the sound of that." "So do I." He wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her against his chest. "Any regrets?" "Not one." "Any fears?" Ruth thought about it. About Ezra rotting in prison. About the scars she'd carry forever. About the long road that had brought her here. "No," she said finally. "Not anymore." "Good." Caleb kissed her neck. "Because I intend to spend the rest of my life making you happy." "That's a tall order." "I'm a tall man." Ruth laughed, really laughed, the kind that came from deep inside, and turned in his arms. "I love you, Caleb Thornton." "I love you too, Ruth Thornton." They went inside together, closing the door on the cold night. In the morning, there would be chores, challenges, 1,000 small problems to solve. But tonight there was only this, a family, a home, a love that had survived the worst and come out stronger. Ruth had spent 3 years in darkness. She'd run from a monster hidden from the world, protected her children with nothing but her own 2 hands. And now, finally, she'd found the light. Not because someone saved her, though Caleb had helped, had loved her, had stood beside her when she needed it most, but because she'd saved herself. She'd found the courage to run, the strength to fight, the faith to trust again. And in doing so, she'd built something beautiful from the ashes of something terrible. A family forged in fire, a love born from pain, a home that would stand against any storm. Ruth Ellen Thornton went to sleep that night with her husband's arms around her and her children safe under her roof. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight she rested, because she'd earned it, because she was finally completely irrevocably free, and because some battles once won stay won forever.